Welcome to this episode of the Digital Drop podcast. We'll be discussing how Copilots are taking digital experiences to the next level on this episode. And I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by an old friend, a mentor, a name that's very well known in the content management industry, Bill Rogers. Welcome to the episode, Bill.
Thanks, Ned. Appreciate having me on the episode. Really appreciate it, and great to catch up with you because my experience working with you has always been wonderful.
Yeah, really pleased to have you on, Bill. I've been wanting to do this for a while now. I think to touch on a little bit of background for anybody listening, but we've known each other, I think, for about 18 years now, Bill.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
It-
My digital experience started at Ectron, where we first were building a web-based editor called eWebEditor Pro, and then we got into the content management space. And so our goal, and Ned, you were a really important part of the team. You were an important part of the UK office, but our goal was really to make it easy for non-technical people to be able to author, create content, publish content, and create experiences from their website. And that goal really hasn't really changed. You can see how things like headless has come along, and we're doing everything to try to improve the experience of the user visiting and ultimately help the organization achieve their goals. And that's usually to sell something or to educate someone.
Yeah, and just for clarity for anybody that's not aware, you were the founder of Ectron, which was at the time one of the four leading enterprise CMS solutions, and is now better known as, or is a part of, Optimizely.
That's correct.
So, yeah, absolutely, Bill. I think your history is a very storied one, and you've always been at the forefront of technology. One of the things that I always admired about you, and why I always refer to you as a mentor, is that you always seem to know what's coming next as far as technology is concerned. Yeah, even though you had this huge, multiple huge businesses that have been very successful, you've always been driven by your passion for technology. And this is something that I've always admired. And we're here to talk about AI. So you've had a number of ventures since Ectron, and you are now a co-founder in AI 1 to Z. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how and what is it, how you moved into this space, and what is it that pushed you in this direction?
So after I sold Ectron, I started a company called Orbita. So Orbita is a conversational AI company in healthcare, still doing some greatness in the space. But my passion really was back to where I left. How do you really take websites and bring them to the next level? How do you have them be able to engage and ultimately drive not only conversations, but drive them to some sort of goal? And so, as time went on in the conversational AI space, there was at that time, think technologies that came from Amazon like Lex, Microsoft Bot Framework. There was technologies from Google Dialogflow, and all of them seemed like they were going to provide a way to create things like a chatbot. Challenges were those technologies relied on something called intents, and intents required entities, and then they required training data. Then you had to manage state, so you had to have state diagrams. And then about after a year of developing a bot, you could go live with it. And so it took too long. And ultimately, when you start doing testing, people change their minds in their conversations. And so the bot, it's all confused to what does it do next. And so the user ultimately needs to say, let me escalate to a live agent. And so people that have live agent escalation, like Orbita did too, that was a very popular way for people to start using it. But for me, that was a failure as far as the experience for the bot user, that the system should be able to adapt to the user's experience, so the user's journey. And so when the person changes the mind, it keeps an understanding of what has already been done. And so that when the user asks the next step, all the history of what they've done is remembered. And there's no more intents, no more creating knowledge data, so that you have answers for questions and answers. And so what used to take really a year, you can get simple question answering done in a very, very short period of time. You just ingest their website and you ingest their content. That's all you need to do. You don't need to break the content up into little multi pieces of content and then create intent model for each piece of content. All that goes away. And so what I see today is this way to drive these kinds of experiences that is going to revolutionize websites in the future and mobile applications.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and the focus is always the same. It's about making life easier for users. It's about making that interaction more streamlined. How we do it in the background is where the advancements are made, right?
Correct.
So,
I think we take two steps. So we are trying to obviously that's the goal, right? But the secondary goal too is, how do you provide the tools to the agencies that are going to deliver these things to clients, so that they can actually see the logs of what's actually happening, so that way, as they're building it, their time to market and the ability for them to run QA tests, allow them to have confidence of what they're building, actually will continue to make this robust, and have confidence that it's going to deliver what they're claiming it will deliver to their clients.
yeah, I can certainly. I mean, as an agency, from our side, we've been experimenting and doing some proof of concept and of your technology. And what's been really impressive in how quickly we can spin up a proof of concept. I think it's something that 5 years ago would have been completely unfeasible and impossible. But every time that we've tried to do it, it's been a matter of hours, sometimes minutes, to actually get these things up and running. So that's been really impressive from an agency's perspective. In terms of the end users, or let's say the industries, the clients and organizations that would benefit from this technology, is there any particular verticals that this is targeted at? And do you have any examples where you see the growth of this being most prominent in the near future?
So, you remember our days at Actron, and we basically said everyone needed a website. Well, we truly believe everyone is going to use a Copilot. What we see is that this is where agencies are going to look at what is it that we can do to customize it to the verticals that we're going to deliver. So what makes this so powerful is that you can have these agents. So when an agent can do is provide context to the Copilot. So think of the Copilot as it has multiple things integrated into it. So a Copilot, first of all, has one agent that's we would call RAG. So RAG is the question answering. This is where we have a connector that will ingest data from a content management system, and it'll keep it in sync with the content management system. You can also ingest PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations. It not only ingests it, but it actually also takes all the images and provides image AI to actually analyze and rewrite the alt text for the images. And so when we give an answer, we can bring back the answer and say, from this content, was there an image relevant to it? And then show that image as well, so that the image comes with the answer. So that's one agent. But you have all these other agents, Salesforce, Dynamics, agents to integrate with marketing automation systems. And so that's another phase of it. Then you have another phases, which is our call to actions, where the reasoning engine says, I know what I'm supposed to do. So we're working right now with a nonprofit. And so the goal of the system is to actually, in this nonprofit is for the entertainment industry. Basically, think of you're trying to sell seats to this organization. So part of what they want to be able to do is not only have the system be able to answer questions like what ballets or what concerts are happening over the week of Christmas and coming back with results, but also it will bring these calls to actions like donate money to the nonprofit. And it's the reasoning engine is smart enough to come up with a plan so it's not overwhelming the user with donate, 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 but really in a subtle way, introducing it when the time is right. Maybe after they purchase their tickets, to introduce a "Would you like to donate" concept. So that's we have some organizations that are using us in intranets where they're loading their HR data into it so that people can ask any kind of HR question, or IT is putting in questions, their PDFs that they would use for their own call centers so that they can help internally answer questions without needing to actually having a human get involved in it. But public sites, it's the art of thinking about what if you had some type of digital assistance that can talk to some back-end workflow, and if with that knowledge, what could it do? The opportunities are endless, really, Mitch.
Yeah, what I've been particularly impressed about in the basic testing and playing around with this technology is the intent recognition. So traditionally when we interact with a website, we do searches, it's very heavily based on how you structure a phrase. But what I've noticed with your technology is it always seems to recognize the intent behind the question. How is it doing that? How has that actually been?
Yeah, so this reasoning engine is a large language model, and so
Yeah.
we support a whole slew of them. I think we now support 15 different models, but OpenAI is our most popular model that's used. So we use the OpenAI 4.0 as the reasoning engine, and we use the OpenAI 4.0 Mini as when we're using the agent for answering questions. And so the reasoning engine gets it basically you're feeding it this prompt, which is just English language. You're telling it what's your purpose, what are you trying to do, and the architecture when it gets a question, the reasoning engine formulates a plan, and it'll say, oh, I need to call these 3 agents in order for me to be able to answer this question. And so it will call them. It can call them in parallel so that it doesn't take long, gets data, and if it can respond immediately with that data, it will answer. If it needs to call another agent because it got some results from Salesforce, for instance, then it will understand what it got from Salesforce and then call the next agent. Like maybe it needs to call some like an email. So it needs to validate who the user is. So it sends out an email. Or if it needs to know more information about someone, it calls an agent to generate a form to collect all the appropriate information from the user so that you're not going back and forth. You're actually seeing an input form for them to be able to collect the data. So it's all these pieces put together that makes basically these systems work. And the more controls that are available on the web chatbot side, the better the experiences that can be created for users.
Yeah, so I think for the less technical listeners, the best way or the easiest way to describe this, it's almost like a chat GPT for your own organization, for your own digital journeys. Would that be an accurate description?
It would. I think the thing that you will see, and you can actually emulate this in ChatGPT, but when you ask a question, the system actually can come back and ask you more information in order for to understand it, which is like before that would have required you to go, if you're doing it in the old days, you'd have to have a flow diagram and say, oh, I'm in this state, I need to go collect this information, so I'm going to go bring this control, all of this programming to get information like we used to do, find doctors, find location for healthcare systems. And when somebody would say, I have a stomach ache, and that we had a large language model that we built ourselves that required well over a year to go develop, and would understand what does a stomach ache actually mean, because that's not a term that doctor in a health system would even match it up with. And so first we have to go do that and understand what that is, and then start the navigation process. And again, there's a lot of work to go do these things. With these new large language models, the concept of it understanding, and I think the concept of it actually being a reasoning engine that's probably the most underestimated thing about this whole industry that we're in, because that reasoning engine is what is thinking about what it can do so that it can ask the next question to get to its goal. And it can go back and forth with you 3 or 4 times and ultimately achieve the goal, but it needed to do 3 or 4 things in order to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities, the art of the possible is really exciting here. When I get my geek hat on, it's fascinating. You want to try new things, you want to do new experiments. I know with my own teams, we've been doing a lot of interesting stuff to try and test the boundaries of this technology. But in the real world, the commercial world and the industries that we work with, generally what drives change and technological adoption is overcoming problems and challenges. So
Yeah.
we're excited about what's possible in the future, but what problems in the real world for businesses is this technology able to solve today?
Well, you think about lots and lots and lots of organizations have call centers. And so they, the dream of the chatbot 8 or 9 years ago was, I'm going to reduce the amount of calls to their call center. And essentially 8 or 9 years ago, what you accomplished was a way for people to be able to say, I want to escalate to a live agent. And so so that live agent could probably talk to more people because they're doing it all digitally. But fundamentally, too high of a percentage of those people that interacted with the chatbot would end up interacting with a live person. And you can put that to dollars and cents. Some people claim it's like $9 per interaction, where you can imagine a solution like this that can actually answer questions. Now you're talking about a couple of pennies per engagement with a user to actually get them to an answer. And I think as you start thinking about agents and how agents can talk to backend systems, they're going to ultimately accomplish tasks. So if you're an airline and you think about somebody wants to change a flight, anytime it gets slightly complicated, it's escalated to a live agent. In the future, it's all going to be done by an assistant that's going to do reasoning, understand what are all the options in an infinitely faster period of time than a human can go look in a board to say, okay, I'm going to change your flight to this, to this, to this, because they're typing in stuff, right? And it just takes a long time to go do something. And you're stuck on a phone for a long, long time. So your experience is not all that great. So call centers, imagine you take the PDF that you train the call center. Like in a health system, people probably don't realize this, but there are hundreds of people that support a health system just for helping them to schedule appointments and answer questions. A broad number of questions have things like, where's parking? Does parking cost money? And so if a person answers the phone to hear a question like, how much does it cost? Well, it just costs that hospital a lot of money for that person to answer that particular question. And ultimately, what this does is that it literally will, you'll start seeing streamlining all sorts of processes. Like you think about, if somebody is in the healthcare world, if somebody decides, okay, I'm going to go, I think I might have a particular procedure, like for example, colonoscopy. You might drink a cup of coffee the morning before, and you might think, oh my goodness, I just did what I'm not supposed to do. I'm going to cancel. And so they basically don't show up. That just costs the hospital unbelievable amount of money. Whereas if you can reach out to them actively saying, do you have any concerns? And your chatbot is there to, person says, I just drank a cup of coffee. I don't think I need to come. And the answer is going to be, yes, you can still come. But these are the things that happen in real time. And a call center the person cancels and they don't have time to go try to catch up to the person to try to find out, why are you canceling? Or they can't get in contact with the person. Why are they canceling an appointment that just lost the hospital hundreds of dollars in a procedure?
So an opportunity for huge cost savings and operational streamlining is what I'm hearing here. Now, you touched on an interesting. Sorry, go on.
And you obviously you focus on the digital experience and what that experience means to the user, because it costs money when the user that's coming to your website decides that this experience is bad. Your brand is hurt by that. And if that user comes and the experience is one, extremely fast, and gets them to the answer that they need to do, they need or want, or accomplishes some task extremely well, your brand, not only awareness but the loyalty has just increased dramatically.
Yeah, well, what we know is how expensive it is to get people to, first of all, interact with your brand and get to your website, and then how typically low the conversion rates are. And what we mean by conversion rate is actually taking them to that next stop of interaction with the organization and increasing that engagement. So anything that can increase the likelihood of that is going to be of a huge benefit. I was interested. I was recently involved in a roundtable discussion about the AI and Copilots, and one of the topics that came up and was hotly debated. People seem to be very passionate on either side of this argument, but there is a valid argument to say, and I think what you just said reinforces that actually, as a human, as a consumer, if I'm trying to get hold of my insurance company or a bank, I still want to speak to a human, because I feel that that's going to be a better experience for me, and I feel safer in that experience. But there's a very valid argument to say that we're getting to a stage where interacting with an AI agent instead of, or an AI co-pilot instead of a human, is actually going to give me a better response, a more accurate response, and a better overall experience. What side of the argument are you on? Are we there yet?
So every month, Nedge, is that the need for the human to get involved gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the experience level that the user that comes to the website has will increase all the time. I would say there's a lot of different. I would say today, if you deployed a solution, your experience that you're going to bring to that user is going to be quite good. I think as time goes on, what has to happen is like an agency like you will sit down and do strategy sessions with the organization. And that strategy session is to say, what's your back end systems? And all we need to do is we need to expose REST APIs to those backend systems. And once we expose those REST APIs, we can now do workflows from the website that requires a phone call to happen today. And so that's why it's not, ultimately you'll start to deploy and you'll start to see benefits, but you'll see the benefits keep on increasing when you start saying, here are all of the workflows that we now can enable if we just expose more of the backend system. Like, for example, a lot of organizations that you would interact with, there's no way from the website for you to get the data or understand. You'll go there, you do search, and as you know, when you go to most websites, that search is a research project. You start opening up tabs of search results and trying to read through the information. If the information exists in those sites, the Copilot makes that research project into a one query. You get the results. It shows you where did they get the results. And that's going to improve the experience of the user. But if, for example, you can authenticate a user and say, okay, I know this user is using this product. And when they ask the question, and that organization may sell hundreds of similar types of products, but we know which product they have, that we filter the PDF of the product manual. When they ask the question, we use that product manual to answer the question from. And now the answers become exactly accurate to the product that they're asking about.
Yeah, I mean, what's been interesting with one large multinational organization that we've been researching the possibilities of this technology for, one of the benefits that we found, most organizations, that especially the well-established and complex organizations, have a lot of what we refer to as technological debt, a lot of legacy systems, a lot of content and information distributed over all sorts of back-end platforms. And one of the biggest challenges is actually overcoming that technological debt, getting everything into a single platform where then it becomes searchable, it becomes usable, the content can be cleaned up. And what's been fascinating is the fact that with this technology, we've been able to skip that entire standardization process, and it goes down to the way in which you ingest content, but we've been able to point that at different sources.
Yeah.
And ultimately achieve the end goal. And we're talking projects that would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've been able to eliminate those challenges. How is the technology so good at ingesting content from so many different sources, yet making it seem seamless?
Yeah, so when you're ingesting data, what's different about the data and how we're finding the data than the search engines were used, it's using a technology called embeddings. So that's like the first phase. So you take the data, you create the embeddings around this data. And what are embeddings? So embeddings are basically you're storing the meaning that exists in the content. And so when you type in a phrase, it says, I want to find relevant content that has this meaning. So so it's not a keyword search that you would used to find that's associated with the typical way that you do search. And so what the huge advantage of that is that you could just ingest your English content and you could ask the question in any language. The question that they ask is the same meaning, whether you say it in English, you say it in Spanish, French, Arabic, Chinese, the meaning doesn't change. So it ultimately brings back the documents that are relevant to that meaning. And we bring back 25 documents. And so then what we do is we have another process that says, I actually need to make it into a smaller subset. But of these 25 documents, we use a more intense AI that narrows it down to a smaller subset. And now that subset, maybe 6, 8 documents, are fed into the large language model for it to go process to ultimately answer the question that you just answer. So that's the question answering. So now in this ingestion process, another step that we do, so we connect to content management system. The content management system, the user makes a change. We see the change, like add, edit, delete. And so we essentially keep the vector database in sync with their content management system. And so the source of truth is still your content management system. Now, when we do that, we can actually look at the metadata. And so part of that metadata might be a taxonomy. And so in that taxonomy could be like, what's the product and product names. And we can add those tags to the suggested content so that you can apply filtering to the content. You get these web controls. One of the web controls that's doing search can provide this advanced filter where you can start to add like a tag to either exclude or include content of these tags so that you can get really accurate results. And then another process is that you can automate that by saying, actually, I know this user, I know what products they have. When they're asking the question, I want to make sure that should I be filtering on one of these tags on products that they own? So there's different techniques of handling that.
Yeah, so ultimately it's this understanding of the meaning of the question, and then understanding of the meaning of the content is what really takes it. It's creating that divorce between what language is the content in and how is it phrased. It's really putting the focus on what is the user trying to understand.
Now, okay. There's also that, there's also techniques that you use to handle what people would have considered traditional RAG, and what problems do you run into, some problems with traditional RAG, and how do you work to address that? So, like, for example, in traditional RAG, doing product comparison isn't very good because you actually have to find meaning of product comparison in your content. And if you haven't created any content that has any comparisons in it, then it has a hard time finding the documents. But as a reasoning engine, it knows, oh, you're doing a compare. And so I'm going to take, you said compare product X to product Y. I'm actually going to call the RAG twice. And so it'll call it simultaneous product X, product Y. It gets its results. Then those results are looked at, both of them, by the reasoning engine, and it formulates the comparison. And it really does an unbelievably great job. Second piece is that when you're dealing with structured content, structured content is popular in a number of different areas. So, like, for example, if you're an e-commerce site, you might be selling products, and those products might be like, let's say they're blood pressure devices. And in those blood pressure devices, you might say between 50 euros and 75 euros, I want to find products that have the largest memory. And so that doesn't really work well with RAG, because remember I said, go get me 25 documents and reduce it down to 8. Now, if I have more than 8 blood pressure devices, the comparison, the analysis is not going to be that great.
Right.
Where what happens is that you can use your agents to actually call like a PIM system, and that you're actually filtering, so that you're saying, here's the filters that I'm applying to it. Now I'm getting all the JSON of the 50 products that fit that comparison. And that JSON is going into the LLM. It's doing an analysis and it's making suggestions to you. So there's always these techniques that you can do. And that's where what we could do 6 months ago was basic reg, now we're doing things with structured data and comparisons and things such as that. And that's making these co-pilots way, way more intelligent. And that's where like we are today. And a year from now, where it'll be will be just just at a whole new level of comparison. And this is why you start thinking about, okay, now I have my chatbot or my search box and I'm getting results, but instead of the result just being answers, the results could be a carousel, or a list view. And so if you said, go get me these blood pressure devices with the filtering that you said, and 50 devices come back, it comes into, it's even that Jason actually doesn't even have to go through the large language model, so there's no speed cost, and you see them all in a carousel or see them all in a list view, and you see a little checkbox that you can click and say and then a button there that says compare. So you look at a little summary of each one, and then you check a few of them off, and you click compare, and it comes up and says, what's important to you? And you might see a little list of checkboxes of what are popular things that people say when they want to compare a blood pressure device. Or you type in, this is what's important to me, and now your comparison is going to get a suggestion. So this is, for an e-commerce organization, that suggestion is ultimately going to lead to a sale much faster than if the user is doing lots and lots of research on your website, but they're probably doing lots and lots of research on your competitor's website, and wherever they get the answer the fastest is going to be a conversion to a sale.
Yeah, so fast adoption is really an opportunity for organizations to overtake their competitors and to stay ahead of the curve. I think whoever's the last to adopt this is going to see the least benefits, right? Because whoever adopts it first is setting a new standard. So on that point, you touched upon the future. I know we're running a little bit out of time, but there's a couple of things that I want to just pick your brain on. This is all based on Gen AI. What is the next big evolution or step in Gen AI as far as you're concerned, in your opinion?
Well, so the modalities are becoming very interesting. So we just introduced speech into our modality, so you can talk into the chatbot and you can hear the response coming back. I think that's extremely important. I think that people will literally every 3 months, the large language models have a new version to it, and its ability to do reasoning keeps on improving. I'm actually really excited about some of what we're seeing in the open source LLM models. We've been working with Meta's Llama series, and we actually can host it ourselves, which has implications for people that have security concerns. And so we're looking at how we could completely have essentially a Docker container that can be deployed by an organization that has no reliance on an LLM that's getting data. Now, I truly believe and trust what Microsoft Azure OpenAI is doing, and they guarantee that they're not using the data for retraining and things. But there is a lot of larger, huge, big organizations that's just not enough. So we're looking at how we can solve that problem as well.
Okay, well, you beat me to the punch. My next question was going to be about security, because that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, in adoption. Yeah. It's concerns. People are nervous. I think AI is such a new thing, right?
Yeah, I think the other big thing in security is the concept of hallucination. And so this concept, the approach that we're taking is that we're basically instructing the large language model not to use its own model to answer the questions, but to use the content that is either comes from an agent or is from the reg. And if it doesn't know the answer, then it has to answer, I don't know, or some variant of that. And so, obviously, if you ask the large language model, what is the capital of France, it knows it's going to be Paris. But when you set it up, it should come back with, I don't know, because you probably don't have any content that describes what the capital of Paris is. And again, that's by design, not to answer the question, but to have the answer that you as an organization know that you can trust that the answer is coming from your content and not the large language model.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it's important to also mention that because we still live in a world of liability for organizations, so it's also possible and relatively straightforward to tell the co-pilots what not to talk about and what not to say. For example, we're not at a stage where you want AI telling medical patients how to treat their conditions or to go and take a certain drug, right? So we're able to intercept the point at which a human needs to get involved and then seamlessly make that transition from an online transition into an offline transition. And I think that's where we as agencies, I think that's where our job comes in. It's understanding those user journeys and which parts should be done by who.
Yes.
Bill, as always, I could speak to you for hours about this, and I'm sure I will have many more conversations, but we are coming to the end of our allocated time slot here. So I'd like to thank you for your time. Really excited to be working with your technology. Really excited to see your passion around this. It always gets me more excited. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Edge. It was, like always, it was great. Looking forward to it as well.
Thank you.